Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Studio City. I'm Terry Hassman-Paulin and I'll be serving as your worship associate this morning. I ring the bell once for those who have gathered here before us. I ring the bell twice for those who are gathered here today. I ring the bell 3 times for all those who will gather here in the future. Please join with us as we sing our opening hymn, We'll Build a Land.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where healers and mothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them gardens instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where healers and others, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll be a land building of ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come, build a land where healers and lovers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come, build the land, my people we seek. Come, build a land where healers and lovers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Please join with me as we recite our words of covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, thus do we covenant. And now let us sing our doxology.
Every
Good morning. Today we're going to focus on International Women's Day, which was officially celebrated on March 8th, 2021. Although we're nearing the end of March, we're still taking time to reflect on the role of women in the world. I'm going to share with you some readings I discovered on the UUA website. In particular, Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. Women stand at the front lines of the COVID-19 crisis as healthcare workers, caregivers, innovators, community organizers, and as some of the most exemplary and effective national leaders in combating the pandemic. The crisis has highlighted both the centrality of their contributions and the disproportionate burdens that women carry. This year's theme for the International Women's Day, Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World, celebrates the tremendous efforts by women and girls around the world in shaping a more equal future and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And now, at the center of our service and the center of our lives, let us take time to bear witness to what is in the center of our hearts. It's time for our weekly ritual of sharing our joys and sorrows. I encourage you to light a candle at this time, and you can type your joy or sorrow into the chat box. Please precede it with the words joy or sorrow so that our reader will know which it is. Our reader today will be Julia Nizinski.
Wait. Good morning. When a sorrow is shared, it is lessened, and when a joy is shared, it is multiplied. In that spirit, Austin has a joy. I love the caring community. I support that. He also said that he's happy to have a place like this as a home. Joyce Fiddler has a joy to finally celebrate my niece Dawn's birthday. We hadn't shared a meal in over a year. Now that Dawn has a new computer, maybe she can join us at UUCSC as she visited in the past. Luis Harbottle has a joy that he had his second vaccine on Friday. We end by honoring all the joys and sorrows kept in the silent sanctuary of our hearts. May we all be warmed in the embrace of our community.
I'll now share with you a poem by Liz Weber, For All That Is Our Life. Spirit of life, help us to be present with all that is our life, both our deepest sorrows and our greatest joys, so that we can truly live engaging in our own life and in our community. Spirit of community, help us know how linked we are, how each one of us, how our cares touches all of us. Help us to ask for support when we are in need and offer our support to others when we are able, so that we may rest in the solace of one another's love. Spirit of love, and help us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, so that we might fully embody love and resist hatred. Spirit of resistance, help us to stick up for what is right, even when we are tired or afraid. Help us to dream of the world as it should be and act to bring that world about. Help us to find hope each day. Spirit of hope, help us through this day and each day. Help us to be present for all that is our life. For all this we pray, Amen, and blessed be. We will now enter a time of silent meditation. Afterward, we will sing the responsive hymn, For All That Is Our Life.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad.
It's time for our weekly ritual of sharing our financial gifts. Now, more than ever, we're relying on the commitment and generosity of our members and friends. So we thank you very much for supporting this ministry and programs of our congregation, programs that offer connection, inspiration, and hope. These things that are needed more than ever. We encourage you to invite your friends and family to attend our worship services. They're only a click away, so that we can share these gifts more widely. The offering will now be gratefully received. Wow, that was great. I couldn't sit still in my seat for very long. Today, I'm privileged to introduce our guest speaker, Ellen Snortland. Ellen is a lawyer, teacher, media theater creative writing teacher, first-time author book coach, and empowerment self-defense instructor. She is a regular opinion columnist for the Pasadena Weekly and various blogs, including the Huffington Post. Ellen has been a speaker, UN Press Corps credentialed journalist, and delegate for major United Nations World Conferences, the Women's Conference in Beijing and Conference Against Racism in South Africa, and the Commission on the Status of Women in New York City. She was the president and co-president of the United Nations Association Pasadena chapter for years, as well as being on the board. Ellen Snortland got her BA in theater and film at UC Irvine and her JD at Loyola Law School in LA. She is the playwright and performer of a one-woman show, Now That She's Gone, which premiered at the New York Fringe Festival. An instructor and on the board of the 501c3 Impact Personal Safety of Los Angeles, Snortland is the author of Beauty Bites Beast, Awakening the Warrior Within Women and Girls, a how-come book about women's personal safety featured on Dateline, NBC, and NPR. Ellen is on several nonprofit boards that serve national interests. Primary is the National Women's History Alliance, the NWHA, where she has found a home for her lifelong study and love of women's history. Melding her commitment to ending racism and sexism, the mission statement of the NWHA could be her personal and professional philosophy. Ellen lives in Altadena, California with her husband, Ken Gruberman, and their two naughty dogs. After the service, Ellen has agreed to do a short mini discussion with our congregation. We'll begin 5 minutes after the end of the service, and then you'll be able to ask questions of Ellen and she will respond. And now I give you Ellen Snortland.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm honored to be a guest speaker this lovely morning in Southern California during March, Women's History Month since 1987. Before I begin, yes, my last name is Snortland. Phonetically, that's spelled land. So I can save you a Google search. Snortland is Norwegian. Phonetically, I've been spelling that way for many years now because people can't believe my last name, but I'll tell you, it sounds a lot better in Norway, where my ancestors come from. I have been and done many things in my life, but one of the roles I'm most proud of is being a board member for the National Women's History Alliance. Since I was a little girl, I've seen through a lens of, hey, that's not fair. And why do boys get to do fill in the blank, whatever that was? And I'm just as good as boys are. And I have been a pain in the butt for decades and proud of it and honing it all the time. So my mission is liberation for all. Although that may look like independence, I actually advocate interdependence. Last night was the first night of Passover, and for Christian churches all over the world, today is Palm Sunday. These are both important events that celebrate freedom and liberation. I have a metaphor that I like to work with. I call it the liberation table. The four legs of that table are history, finances, self-expression, and self-protection. If any of the legs at the liberation table are uneven, broken, then the individual and the group within which the person relates is wobbly. Those legs apply to whichever group you most closely identify with, whether that's age, religion, race, gender, LGBTQT, neuro-relating, physical ability, or an intersection of many of those things as individuals are complex. So, a primary leg of that table is history. As I mentioned, March is Women's History Month. And why do I include that as a necessary leg in the liberation table? Well, so many of us who aren't in the dominant culture have an experience of floundering, treading water, drowning in doubt and fear. If we simply move over a few feet, we could stand on the shoulders of our forebears. Without our history, we are cut off from seeing what is possible. If you can see it, you can be it is not simply a saccharine bumper sticker sentiment. The idea of studying and promoting women's history or Black history, Asian, Native American, queer, differently abled was absolutely heretical not too long ago. When I started college when I was 16, it was in Billings, Montana at Rocky Mountain College. And in the early 1970s, I bounded up the stairs of the student union and a cowboy whistled at me. I walked right over to him and I said, why did you whistle? He was taken aback and said, you're cute. I didn't get the connection since my family whistled when we wanted the horses to come in from the pasture. We got into a back and forth and he finally asked me why I was in college. I said, I'm going to be a lawyer. He scoffed and said, girls can't be lawyers. Then we got into sophisticated repartee. They can't. When finally he said, name one girl lawyer. I was stymied. I couldn't. In Billings, I couldn't see or be like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Bella Abzug or Polly Murray or anyone whose shoulders I could stand on. Because when I was a little girl, I used to say I was going to be a lawyer when I grew up because it was a guaranteed laugh and I loved making people laugh. My high school career counselor told me to forget my law school dream because I would prevent a deserving man from taking the spot I would take up and waste when I got married and had kids. I got into Loyola Law School, passed the California bar exam, and promptly said, bye-bye. The environment for females at that time was too intimidating to me. Even in law school, I didn't know about Gloria Allred. I didn't know about the badasses at the National Organization for Women Legal Defense Fund. I couldn't see them, and I couldn't see being them. Fast forward 50 plus years, I've used my advocacy and education to promote all the things that I grew up without. I'm a frequent speaker, writer, reader, and thinker about gender. And it's no accident that since my mother adored Eleanor Roosevelt, who had a daily newspaper column, I grew up to become a columnist. I could see it. so I could be it. The other vital leg in the liberation table, financial. One of the first things that white women in the 60s awoke to was that being financially dependent on traditional marriage structures, at least in the US, with the man going outside to work and the woman staying in the home, often gave her no or less of a say about almost everything, especially her own freedom. If the husband was abusive or violent and the wife without independent means, well, she was often in a position where she didn't dare leave, especially with kids. White privilege dictated that a white man who had a wife and worked outside the home was an abject failure, and a white woman who wanted to work outside the home was aberrant. Of course, women of color knew the outside/inside hierarchy of privilege was fiction for many of them. They knew that for any kind of financial stability, all hands on deck was necessary for them and for farm and ranch women too. My mother couldn't get a credit card until 1974, and wait a minute, nor could I for that matter. And a mortgage? Are you kidding? Ever wonder about the backlash and hostility toward different out groups working toward financial freedom? Well, I love and promote the work of Dr. Riane Eisler, who is one of the most important liberation philosophers of her time. Her book, The Real Wealth of Nations, delineates exactly where the worldwide economies benefit in the short term by maintaining free or low-wage workers, largely made up of women and people of color. Women's work is not even included in the GNP, and women fuel a large and hidden economy around tables and under the table in the dark economies like prostitution and gambling and sex trafficking, huge industries. Another leg of the liberation table is self-expression. As they say, victors write history and determine which storytellers create and keep stories in place. They are the gatekeepers, and unless stories hew to the dominant culture or the status quo, they will not get through the story gate. We're still fighting this leg of liberation with primarily white men in getting to financially decide or dictate which stories get attention, get printed, made on screen or broadcast, or which radio shows get carried, who gets to say which stories are valued or listened to. The late, not so great Rush Limbaugh single-handedly created an atmosphere of hate, racism, homophobia, and sexism and ableism nationally since the late 80s. Can you name one woman of any color or man of color that has had the reach and the impact that Mr. Limbaugh had? I'm waiting. Nope, you cannot, because they didn't exist and don't exist to this day. We are story listening and story making creatures. If we are closed off from hearing stories, we all suffer at some level. Inclusivity and intersectionality in storytelling is not some romantic notion. It impacts how we innovate and understand and relate to our world. Female scholars and researchers make a difference. A female archaeologist on a dig was able to enlighten her male colleagues when one of them was musing that the bone they found had 28 slashes cut into it that must have represented a very successful season of hunting. Wow, this hunter must have bagged 28 deer in a season. Bringing her life as lived experience to the field, she was able to say, boys, I think a woman made those cuts to represent her menstrual cycle. I hope she eye rolled them. And then self-defense. Most white women anyway, because I grew up among white people and grew up and still are being raised with the baked in idea that they are unable to defend themselves. And one of my main missions in life has been to humanize men enough that we are not swept away by the idea that they are cyborg-like in their physical prowess. My book and movie, Beauty Bites Beast, are designed to challenge mindsets. Think globally, act locally. Is there anything more local than your body? And how do we address the ongoing and tragic pandemic of violence against women if a woman can't even say no or say stop, don't come any further? I was in a train station in Japan. I heard a lot of commotion. It was a hot day, and I looked over, and an elderly Japanese man had spotted me. He was probably a veteran of World War II, and I was obviously an American. He yelled and screamed and shuffled closer and closer to me. He got within 3 yards, and I put up my hands, yelled, and said, "No, stop, back up, do not come any closer." Now, he did not speak English, I'm guessing. And my reaction did not fit his script. He gave me a double or maybe even a triple take. He saw a clump of schoolgirls to his left, so he decided to reel toward them. They, like most girls around the world, looked at their shoes and giggled. When he got too close to them, I yelled, "No, leave them alone, back off." Again, I broke up his mindset. He stumbled back toward me, and I said, "No, no, no." He twirled back to the girls. In unison, they all held up their hands and yelled, "No, no, no." He gave up and left. A crowd of women of all ages broke out in applause. The desire to be left alone transcends language, culture, and custom. The schoolgirls could see it and be it. Meanwhile, this is a good season to reflect on your own liberation table. Are your finances healthy? Do you speak up for yourself? Do you walk around scared of people? And finally, do you know the history of your own family or group? I predict if you lengthen and strengthen those legs, you'll experience more freedom. I'll close with my experience of a liberation table, a Seder table. So many of us who were raised as Christians forget that the Last Supper was actually a Passover Seder. Easter and Passover are always together because they are both movable feasts. Who knew? For a long time, I didn't. Raised in South Dakota, the only Jewish person I was familiar with was Anne Frank, and of course, Jesus. The third Jewish person I knew, I married in 1977. His family was mortified and had to muster every tolerance molecule they had to accept his choice of me as his fiance. I soon was referred to behind my back as the shiksa, a quasi-derogatory term for a non-Jewish woman. Oy vey. My Norwegian American ultra-Lutheran grandmother morphed her own religious bigotry into bittersweet acceptance. My grandma walked up to my handsome new groom at our wedding reception. She peered up at him and yelled as only slightly deaf people can bellow, "Your people killed my savior, but you seem like a nice boy." Ofta, Norwegian for oy vey. Being the quintessential good sport, I offered to convert. My new husband, petrified at the idea of me becoming Jewish, envisioned my conversion and gently talked me out of it. He was certain if I did that, I would become a rabbi, because that was how I did things. He was clearly familiar with my meshuggah approach to life. Yiddish for slightly nuts, but with zeal. Imagine his chagrin when I announced, "I'm creating a Seder." I love the idea of Seder, the ritual at Passover, which is a commemoration of the Jews' exodus from Egypt at the hands of Pharaoh. Of course, we all have pharaohs we need deliverance from, whether that pharaoh literally enslaves a whole race or is a number 45 supporter who believes that January 6th was a setup by Antifa and liberals. Seder is a beloved holiday for many people, Jew and shiksas alike, a literal liberation table. A theater producer at the time, I roped in every theater friend I had and created a Seder production team. We decided our Seder would be a feminist one, and we would include, hold on to your yarmulkes, women. Being an ardent women's rights advocate, I was taken aback by some of the customs my husband had grown up with. His mom had dairy dishes, meat dishes, Passover dairy dishes, Passover meat dishes. I'm thinking, geez, women did not make up these rules. The patriarchs dared to create ritual texts for the Seder, called a Haggadah, with no mention of women during the flight from Egypt. They were saying, let my people go. Parenthetically, except we're going to keep our women serving us. How about you let us go? I thought. Let's see, we're supposed to gather manna, milk the goats, clean the tents, bake the unleavened bread quickly, keep the kids quiet, separate the meat and dairy dishes, plus the separate set of Passover dishes, clear the dwelling of anything non-kosher, prepare the table, cook the special Passover meal, then smile at relatives we don't really like. All while chafing at our historical contributions being ignored. As we wait on you? Not at our liberation table. My first Shiksa Passover finally came to pass, excuse the expression, and was a sit-down Seder for 60 people. As custom dictates, we set a place for the wandering prophet Elijah, just in case he decided to return. Later, I would learn that Elijah probably did more to wipe out matriarchal and matrilineal goddess cultures than any of the other prophets, but that's a whole other sermon. In any event, we set a place for Miriam too, just in case she wanted to drop by. After all, if it hadn't been for Miriam and that ancient Shiksa, Princess Bisya, Pharaoh's daughter, Moses would have had a very different fate than leading the Jews, females and males, out of Egypt. Throughout history, there have always been women and girls, making everyone's history and tables possible. Now my Seders include, and I invite my guests to reflect on, 1, current oppression in their lives. One says, I feel enslaved by the addiction to please everyone all the time. Or, I think I have a drinking problem. Or, I have a compulsion to customize holidays to my personal feminist liking. 2, actions to take in the coming year to sever those self-designed ropes of said enslavement. 5 things that they are grateful for. Sadly, my marriage to my first husband ended, but I will always be grateful to him for being a mensch and introducing me to a rich heritage I continue to celebrate. So, happy Pesach, happy Easter, and may Patty, the Easter platypus, since a platypus is the only mammal I'm aware of that leaves eggs, bring you spring's sweetness to your table. And thank you.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. Feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
As I extinguish our chalice this week, I wish you all peace and a wonderful, healthy week.
Too late.
Hey, Terry, would you like to give your benediction?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Let me highlight you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Ellen for that wonderful, wonderful sermon. It gave us so much to think about, and everybody, we're going to have a chance to continue the discussion after the service. At, I would say 11 o'clock, we will be able to meet again with Ellen and have a wonderful question and answer period. So thank you, Ellen. It was fantastic. And now, our benediction. Where hate rules, let us bring love. Where sorrow, joy. Let us strive more to comfort others than to be comforted, to understand others than to be understood, to love others than to be loved. For it is in giving that we receive, and in pardoning that we are pardoned. And those are the words of Saint Francis of Assisi. And we have already extinguished our chalice, and now we will have our postlude, and then please come back for the discussion with Ellen. Please return in no more than 5 minutes. See you soon.